They say you never forget the sound of your own heart breaking. Mine shattered on a stage in front of 200 people, under crystal chandeliers and champagne toasts, when the woman I called mother ripped the engagement ring off my finger and threw it into the flames. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was watching the man I loved stand there and do absolutely nothing. I never imagined my engagement party would end with me lying on the floor of the Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom, soaked in champagne, my cheek burning from the slap that still echoed in my ears. But looking back now, maybe I should have seen it coming. The signs were always there. I was just too desperate to belong to notice them. My name is Akina, and this is the story of how I went from being the family doormat to the woman who burned their entire world down. I was 7 years old when the Harris family took me in. My parents had died in a car accident on the I-95, and with no other relatives willing to take me, I ended up in foster care. That's where Brenda Harris found me, or rather, that's where she found her next charity project. You see, Brenda wasn't the kind of woman who did things out of the goodness of her heart. She did things for the photo opportunities, for the social capital, for the way it made her look at the country club. Richard Harris, my adoptive father, was a real estate mogul in Manhattan. His company, Harris Development Group, had its fingerprints all over the city's skyline. Brenda was his trophy wife, the kind of woman who spent her mornings at SoulCycle and her afternoons planning fundraisers. Then there was Jessica, their biological daughter who was 2 years older than me and made sure I never forgot that I was the charity case and she was the real daughter. For 15 years, I played my role perfectly. I was the grateful orphan, the one who never complained, who always said thank you, who bent over backward to prove I deserved the roof over my head. I got straight A's at Dalton School while Jessica barely scraped by. I volunteered at the soup kitchen while Jessica partied in the Hamptons. I wore hand-me-downs while Jessica got a new wardrobe every season, and through it all, I told myself it was okay. I told myself I was lucky. I told myself that one day, if I was good enough, they would really love me. College was my escape, or so I thought. I got a full scholarship to NYU, majoring in business administration. Richard actually seemed proud of that, probably because it cost him nothing. Those 4 years were the freest I'd ever felt. I had my own dorm room, my own friends who didn't know I was the adopted charity case. I even had my own part-time job at a bookstore in Greenwich Village, my first taste of financial independence. That's where I met Liam. Liam Montgomery walked into the Strand bookstore on a rainy October afternoon during my junior year. He was tall, with dark hair and the kind of smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He asked me out for coffee that same day, and I said yes, without hesitation. I didn't know then that his family made the Harris family look middle class. The Montgomerys were old money, the kind that came over on the Mayflower and never left. Liam's father owned half of Wall Street. But Liam wasn't like that. He was studying architecture, wanted to design buildings that made people feel something. He was kind and thoughtful and made me laugh. For the first time in my life, I felt like someone chose me. We dated for 3 years. 3 years of late-night conversations, weekend trips to upstate New York, talks about the future. He knew my story, knew about the Harris family and how complicated things were. He told me it didn't matter, that we would build our own family. I believed him. God help me, I believed every word. After graduation, I moved back to the Harris house in Tribeca. Richard had made it clear that if I was serious about Liam, I needed to be closer to the family. I should have known better. Living back in that house was like regression therapy in the worst way. Brenda found new ways to remind me of my place every single day. She would introduce me to her friends as the girl we took in, rather than her daughter. She gave me a list of chores every morning, things that Jessica never had to do. When I tried to assert myself, she would look at me with this cold smile and say, "After everything we've done for you, this is the least you can do." Richard offered me a job at his company, which I thought was a gesture of acceptance. It wasn't. He paid me barely above minimum wage while I worked 60-hour weeks as his personal assistant. Meanwhile, Jessica, who had dropped out of FIT after 1 semester, was given a made-up title as Director of Brand Relations with a 6-figure salary and did absolutely nothing. But I told myself it was temporary. I told myself that once Liam and I got married, I could leave. I could finally be free. Jessica was the cruelest of all because she enjoyed it. She would go out of her way to humiliate me. She would borrow my clothes without asking and return them ruined. Once, at a dinner party, she loudly asked me to refill her wine glass in front of all the guests, as if I were the help. I swallowed it all. Every insult, every humiliation, every reminder that I didn't belong. Because Liam kept telling me to be patient, that once we were engaged, everything would smooth over. I was such a fool. The engagement happened on a Saturday in June, right on the Brooklyn Bridge at sunset. It was beautiful. Liam got down on one knee and asked me to marry me. I said yes through tears, and for one perfect moment, I thought my life was finally beginning. Brenda insisted on throwing the engagement party. She said it was tradition. I should have been suspicious of how eager she was, but I was too caught up in the fantasy. The party was scheduled for a Saturday evening 3 weeks later. Brenda had rented out the Rainbow Room at Rockefeller Center, 200 guests, the entire social registry of New York. It was supposed to be the event of the season. The night of the party, the Rainbow Room looked like something out of a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. Tables were draped in ivory silk with centerpieces of white roses. A string quartet played softly. When I approached to ask if there was anything I could help with, Brenda looked me up and down and said, "Just try not to embarrass us tonight." I should have left then. But I didn't. Liam showed up with his parents at 7. His father, William Montgomery, was tall and imposing with the kind of presence that made rooms go quiet. His mother, Catherine, was elegant and cold. When Liam introduced me, Catherine's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. The dinner was excruciating. Brenda kept making little comments throughout the meal, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Akina was so lucky we found her. Poor thing had nothing when we took her in. After dinner, Richard stood up to give a toast. He talked about family, about legacy, about the Harris name. Then he mentioned me, almost as an afterthought, and of course Akina, who we raised as our own, despite the challenges. The room filled with uncomfortable laughter. Then it was time for the formal engagement presentation. Liam and I stood on the small stage at the front of the room. He slipped the ring on my finger, and I looked up at him, so full of hope. That's when Brenda stepped onto the stage. She took the microphone, and the room went quiet. "Thank you all so much for being here tonight. It's truly wonderful to see my son Liam about to marry into such a prestigious family as the Montgomerys." "Wait, her son? I'm sorry," William Montgomery called out. "Your son?" Brenda's smile widened. "Of course, when we took in this poor orphan girl all those years ago, we never imagined she'd reach quite so high above her station." The room went deadly silent. But I suppose that's what happens when you take in strays. They forget where they came from. They forget that no matter how many fancy dresses you put them in, they're still just charity cases. I looked at Liam, desperate for him to do something. His face had gone pale, but he didn't move. He didn't speak. "The truth is," Brenda said, stepping closer to me, "we've supported you long enough, Akina. And this is how you repay us? By trying to worm your way into one of the most prominent families in New York? You actually thought you belonged here?" She laughed, a cruel, sharp sound. "You're nothing, Akina, just a pathetic little orphan we took pity on." Before I could react, Brenda grabbed my wrist and twisted it violently. The engagement ring was ripped from my finger. "You don't deserve this," she snarled. She turned and walked to the edge of the stage where there was a decorative gas fireplace. In one swift motion, she threw the ring into the flames. "Trash belongs in the trash," she said. The room erupted in gasps. I stood there, trembling, unable to move. Jessica suddenly appeared beside her mother, holding a glass of champagne. She was laughing. "Mom's right. You really thought you could marry into the Montgomery family?" She threw the champagne directly in my face. The cold liquid hit me like a slap. Then Brenda was in front of me again. "Look at me when I'm talking to you," she hissed. When I didn't respond fast enough, she slapped me across the face. Hard. I staggered backward and fell. I hit the stage floor hard, gasping. From my position on the floor, I could see everything. Jessica standing over me with that satisfied smirk, Brenda looking down at me with pure contempt. Richard at his table, arms crossed, watching like this was exactly what he'd expected. And Liam. Liam standing at the edge of the stage, his face white, his hands trembling, but still not moving. His father had a hand on his shoulder, holding him back, and Liam was letting him. "Get up!" Richard's voice cut through the chaos. "You're making a scene, Akina." Something inside me snapped. Not in the way you might think. Everything went very quiet in my head. It was like someone had flipped a switch, and suddenly all the desperate need to be loved by these people just stopped. I looked up at them and saw them clearly for the first time in 15 years. None of them loved me. They never had. And I was done pretending otherwise. I stood up slowly. I didn't try to wipe away the champagne. I stood there, looked each of them in the eye, and felt clarity. Cold, perfect clarity. "You're right," I said quietly. "I don't belong here. I never belonged here, because belonging here would mean being like you, and I'd rather be nothing than be that." I walked off the stage, through the parted crowd. No one tried to stop me. I walked out of the Rainbow Room, out of Rockefeller Center, and into the New York night. I didn't look back. I didn't cry. I just walked. I walked for hours, through Midtown, down Fifth Avenue, through the Village. My feet were bleeding by the time I stopped at a small park. I sat on a bench and made a decision. They wanted me gone? Fine. But I wouldn't go quietly. I was going to burn their entire world to the ground. The next morning, I woke up on my friend Maya's couch in Brooklyn. She had been my roommate at NYU. She took one look at me standing at her door at 3 a.m, still in my ruined dress, and pulled me inside without questions. When I told her everything, she was ready to commit murder. Who does that? Who humiliates someone like that at their own engagement party? People who never saw me as human, I said. I spent the next 2 days with my phone turned off. On the third day, I turned it back on. 53 missed calls, most from Liam. Akina, I'm so sorry. I didn't know they were going to do that. Please call me. Empty words from an empty man. Richard's messages were different. We need to discuss your departure from the company. That's when I remembered something. In my 3 years working as Richard's personal assistant, I had access to everything. His emails, his files, his passwords. I knew where the bodies were buried. And suddenly, I had a plan. I borrowed Maya's laptop and started going through my old work emails. Richard was too arrogant to think I'd ever use any of this information. He was wrong. I spent the next week buried in research. The first thing I found was Jessica's secret. She was having an affair with her personal trainer, Derek. Not just any affair, but one she'd been documenting on a private Instagram account. Photos, messages, places they'd gone together. All while she was engaged to Bradley Whitmore, son of one of Richard's biggest business partners. But that wasn't even the good part. Jessica had been using her company credit card to fund her affair. Hotel rooms, dinners, weekend trips. She'd charged everything to Harris Development Group. I found receipts totaling over $140,000. I saved everything. Then I moved on to Richard. This took longer. But I'd been the one managing his schedule, filing his documents for 3 years. I knew the structure of his business inside and out. That's how I found the offshore accounts. Harris Development Group wasn't just a real estate company. It was a massive money laundering operation. Richard had shell companies in the Cayman Islands, in Panama, in Singapore. He was funneling money through fake property deals, hiding income from the IRS. We were talking about millions, tens of millions. I sat back and smiled for the first time in 2 weeks. But I wasn't done yet. Brenda deserved something special. Brenda's secret wasn't digital. I had to talk to people. I started with Maria, the housekeeper who had always been kind to me. I called her, asked if we could meet for coffee. When I asked her about Brenda's past, she was initially reluctant. But when I explained that I deserved to know the truth, she sighed. There was a baby, Maria said quietly. Before she married Mr. Harris, she had a baby when she was very young, a boy. She gave him up for adoption. My heart stopped. Brenda, who lorded her role as a mother over everyone, had abandoned her own child. She was 17. Her family made her do it. But yes, she had a son, and she gave him away. Mr. Harris doesn't even know. This was it. This was Brenda's deepest shame. Finding him took another 2 weeks. I hired a private investigator with my savings. His name was Marcus Bradley. 35 years old, living in Princeton, working as a high school teacher. And he had no idea his birth mother was Brenda Harris. By the time I was done, it had been 2 months since the engagement party. 2 months of working late nights to save money. 2 months of silence from the Harris family, who probably thought I'd slunk away into obscurity. They had no idea what was coming. The annual Harris Development Group Charity Gala was scheduled for the last Saturday in September. It was Richard's signature event, held at the Museum of Natural History. Tickets were $10,000 a plate. The guest list included everyone who was anyone in New York. This year, they were raising money for foster children. The irony wasn't lost on me. Perfect. I spent the last of my savings on a dress. A red dress, the kind that demanded attention. Stella McCartney, bought at consignment. It fit like it had been made for me. When I looked at myself in the mirror the night of the gala, I barely recognized myself. I looked like someone who could burn down an empire. You look terrifying, Maya said, in the best way possible. Good, I said, picking up my clutch. Inside was a USB drive containing everything I'd collected. The Museum of Natural History was lit up like a beacon when I arrived. The Hall of Ocean Life was breathtaking. The massive blue whale suspended from the ceiling, tables covered in deep blue linens. A 20-piece orchestra played. I spotted the Harris family immediately. Brenda in glittering silver, Jessica in black lace, Richard in a custom tuxedo. They looked like royalty. It was Richard who noticed me first. His expression went from shock to anger. He walked toward me. "What the hell are you doing here?" he hissed. "Hello, Dad," I said pleasantly. "It's been a while." "You need to leave, now." "I don't think so." I pulled out the USB drive. "Not until we have a little chat. This contains evidence that will end your career. Should we discuss this here, or somewhere more private?" His jaw clenched. "The back gallery. 5 minutes." He turned and walked away. But I wasn't going to meet him privately. This was too important to happen in the shadows. Instead, I walked over to the event coordinator by the stage. I pulled out $500 bills from my clutch. "I need you to do something for me," I said. "In about 10 minutes, Richard Harris is going to give his speech. I need you to put something on those screens behind the stage." She looked at the money, then at me. I could lose my job. "You could also make a month's rent in 5 minutes. All you have to do is plug in this USB drive and hit play when he starts talking." She took the money and the drive. "What's on it?" "Justice," I said. 20 minutes later, Richard took the stage. The room quieted as he approached the microphone. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began. "As many of you know, Harris Development Group has always been committed to giving back. Tonight, we're raising funds for foster children." The screens behind him flickered. Richard paused. The Harris Development Group logo disappeared, replaced by a title slide, "The Real Harris Family, a story of fraud, deception, and abuse." The room went silent. Richard's face drained of color. The first image appeared: Jessica and Derek kissing on a beach. The timestamp showed it was from 3 weeks ago. Beside it, text listed the date and amount charged to the company credit card: $16,000. More photos cycled through: Jessica and Derek at hotels, restaurants, each with corresponding receipts. The amounts added up on screen: $147,000 over 2 years. Jessica screamed, "Turn it off!" The presentation continued. Now it showed Jessica's calendar, her company emails, proof she hadn't done a single day of work in over a year despite drawing a $200,000 salary. The text read, "Jessica Harris, Director of Stealing from Daddy's Company." The screen changed again. Financial documents, simplified into a flowchart that anyone could understand. Money from Harris Development Group flowing into shell companies. Fake property deals. Inflated expenses. The text read, "Richard Harris, real estate mogul or money launderer." A running tally appeared, showing the estimated amount Richard had hidden from the government: $43 million. Richard's business partners stared at the screens with horror. They were already distancing themselves mentally. Richard finally found his voice. "This is lies, all lies." "It's not lies," I called out, stepping forward. Every head turned to look at me. "Every document up there is real. I should know. I'm the one who filed most of them." Brenda's face twisted with rage when she saw me. "You did this." "Not yet," I said, "but I'm about to." The screens changed one more time. A birth certificate. Old but legible. Mother's name: Brenda Louise Whitmore. Baby's name: Baby Boy Whitmore. Date of birth: the 15th of March, 1990. Below it, adoption papers. The text read, "Brenda Harris, Mother of the Year, or Mother who abandoned her firstborn son?" Brenda's face went from rage to absolute terror. Richard turned to stare at her. "What is this?" Richard demanded. "Brenda, what is this?" But Brenda couldn't speak. I walked slowly toward the stage. The crowd parted. I climbed the stairs and took the microphone from Richard's nerveless fingers. "Hello, everyone," I said. "For those who don't remember me, my name is Akina. I was the charity case the Harris family took in 17 years ago. The orphan they rescued. The grateful daughter who was supposed to spend her life being thankful." I looked directly at Brenda. "You called me a stray dog who didn't know her place. You were right about one thing. I didn't know my place. Because my place was never with you." I turned to address the room. 2 months ago, at my engagement party, this family humiliated me in front of 200 people. Brenda ripped my engagement ring off and threw it in a fire. She slapped me. Jessica threw champagne on me. Richard told me I was an embarrassment. And my fiancé, Liam Montgomery, stood there and did nothing. I saw Liam near the back with his parents. His face was ashen. William Montgomery looked furious, staring at the financial documents. "They wanted me gone," I continued. "They wanted me to disappear quietly. But I realized something that night. I realized that I had spent 15 years trying to earn love from people who were incapable of giving it. I had spent 15 years being a victim." I paused. "So I decided to stop being a victim. I decided to become a hunter." I held up the USB drive. "Everything on these screens is backed up. Copies have been sent to the IRS, to the SEC, and to a journalist at the New York Times. By tomorrow morning, this will be everywhere." Richard tried to lunge at me, but security was moving toward the stage. "You've destroyed this family." Richard snarled. "No," I said calmly. "You destroyed yourselves. I just made sure everyone else got to see it." I turned to Brenda, who had collapsed into a chair, crying. "And you, Brenda, I hope your son Marcus finds out about you from the news. I hope he shows up at your door and asks why you abandoned him while you were so eager to take in a stranger's child for photo ops." I descended from the stage and walked through the crowd. This time, no one looked away. They stared at me with shock, with awe, with fear. When I reached the exit, Liam was waiting. His face was pleading. "Akina, please, we need to talk. I'm sorry. I love you. I still love you." I looked at him and felt nothing. "No," I said simply. "What?" "No, we don't need to talk. No, I don't accept your apology. And no, you don't love me. You love the idea of me, the compliant version who made you feel like a hero. But that person never existed. Akina. I'm done with you, Liam. I'm done with all of you. I'm walking away and I'm never looking back." "Where will you go?" I smiled. "I'll figure it out. That's the beautiful thing about burning your old life to the ground. You get to build whatever you want in the ashes." I walked out into the September night. Behind me, I could hear the chaos erupting. Sirens, security trying to control the crowd, journalists realizing they'd stumbled onto a major story. I kept walking. My phone started buzzing. News alerts, calls from numbers I didn't recognize. I turned it off and kept walking. When I finally arrived at Maya's apartment in Brooklyn, it was past midnight. Maya was waiting, her laptop open. "Holy shit," she said. "It's everywhere. They're calling it the biggest scandal in New York society since Madoff." "Good," I said, collapsing on the couch. "You just nuked an entire family from orbit." They had it coming. We stayed up until dawn watching the story unfold. Richard arrested by federal agents. Jessica's engagement called off. Brenda admitted to a psychiatric hospital. Harris Development Group stock plummeting. The New York Times article came out 3 days later. How one woman exposed New York's most toxic power family. The journalist had tracked down Marcus, Brenda's abandoned son. He gave an interview talking about how he'd always wondered about his birth mother and never imagined she was a wealthy socialite. He was angry, hurt, confused, exactly as Brenda deserved. The legal consequences came fast. Richard was charged with tax evasion, money laundering, and fraud. Jessica was charged with embezzlement. Brenda faced no criminal charges, but her reputation was obliterated. Every charity board asked for her resignation. The Harris family empire didn't just fall, it imploded. As for me, I spent the next few months rebuilding. I moved into a tiny studio in Queens. I got a job at a consulting firm. I went to therapy. A lot of therapy. I had to learn how to trust people again, how to set boundaries, how to believe I deserved good things. It was hard. Some days, the weight of everything crushed me. But then I would remember that night at the museum, the look on their faces, the feeling of taking my power back, and I would keep going. 6 months after the gala, I got a letter from Marcus Bradley. He wanted to thank me for exposing the truth about his birth mother. We met for coffee in Manhattan. He was kind, thoughtful, nothing like Brenda. We talked for hours. "You know what's funny?" Marcus said. "Brenda spent her whole life trying to look like a saint, and in the end, the daughter she tortured and the son she abandoned are both better people than she ever was." He was right. A year after the engagement party disaster, I was living in a comfortable apartment in Astoria, working a job I enjoyed, and dating a kind guy named David who was a public defender. I had real friends. I had hobbies. I had therapy. I had peace. The Harris family was gone. Richard was serving 10 years in federal prison. Jessica had moved to Los Angeles with minimal success. Brenda was living alone in New Jersey, her fortune gone, her reputation destroyed. Liam had moved to London. He'd sent me a few emails, but I never responded. There was nothing left to say. On the anniversary of the engagement party, Maya threw a celebration at her apartment. Just close friends, wine, and a cake that said, "1 year of freedom." "Speech," Maya demanded. I stood up. "A year ago tonight, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd lost everything. But I was wrong. I hadn't lost everything. I'd just cleared out all the toxic garbage keeping me from seeing what actually mattered." I raised my glass. To burning down the things that don't serve you, to building something better in the ashes, and to choosing yourself, even when it's terrifying. "To Akina," Maya said, "the baddest bitch I know." Everyone laughed and clinked glasses, and I felt genuine happiness. Real, solid, unshakable happiness that came from knowing who I was and what I was worth. Later that night, I got a notification. An article from a business magazine about my new consulting firm focused on corporate ethics and transparency. I smiled. 6 months ago, I'd started my own business, working with companies to identify toxic practices and ethical violations. I used everything I'd learned from taking down the Harris empire to help others. The irony was beautiful. As the car crossed back into Manhattan, I looked out at the glittering skyline and thought about the girl I used to be. The girl who was so desperate for love that she accepted crumbs. The girl who thought she was nothing without approval. That girl was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who knew her worth. They called me a stray dog, who didn't know her place. And they were right. Because my place was never at their feet. My place was standing on my own 2 feet, building my own life, and making sure no one ever treated me like that again. I'd burned their world to the ground, and from those ashes, I'd built something they could never take away. My freedom, my dignity, and my self-worth. And that was the best revenge of all. Not just destroying them, but thriving without them. Not just surviving, but becoming someone I was proud to be. The car pulled up to my apartment. I walked up to my cozy space, decorated the way I wanted, filled with things I'd bought with my own money. I poured a glass of wine, sat on my couch, and pulled out my laptop. I had work tomorrow, meetings with clients. I had therapy on Wednesday. I had dinner plans with David on Friday. I had a life that was entirely my own. And for the first time in 24 years, I wasn't running from anything. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I wasn't desperate to belong somewhere. I already belonged, to myself. I raised my glass to the empty apartment, to the girl I used to be, and the woman I'd become. "Here's to burning it all down," I said softly. And here's to rising from the ashes. The wine tasted like freedom, and it was perfect.